Okay, and with that, we move on to the main event of the Super Saturday, such as it is. We are in Paris, Saturday, 8:10 local time, or say 8:10 British Irish time, 8 and 9:10, I think, in France.
That's right.
Stade de France, Paris. It's France v Ireland. It's going to be reffed by Wayne Barnes, returned from his COVID, missed out on the Premiership final, I think.
Yeah, actually,
COVID.
I have Wayne Barnes down as the ref, and it didn't even occur to me that he was COVIDed out last week. There could be a substitute ref.
That he's down certainly as it stands. I'm not sure if that has changed because he was a doubt.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, the weather in terms of the forecast is meant to be about 16 degrees and clear enough.
Not going to be not like the Wales game where we're expecting a potential washout.
Yeah, no, this is good running rugby conditions. It's fine. Certainly, like we've seen Ireland struggle and flail about in the 28 degree heat before. It won't be anything like that. So you'd expect both teams to be comfortable and confident enough and going for it, given the scenario. We'll look at the colour of the game, like. Obviously, we were outlining in the England preview just how the points differential is working. Ireland sitting in first currently. They know that a bonus point win puts them out of reach and gets them
impossible
to catch. Besides that, they will know this is the last game of the weekend, so they'll know exactly what points margin will do it for them.
They have a 23-point buffer over England, and I think they have to assume that won't be enough to make the points difference a relevant
thing. Yeah, for sure. Like if England do anything like what they should do and normally do, then you're looking at like even if it's one of those scenarios like we have to win by 12 points if Italy
Would you not just go get the 4
Yeah, exactly.
tries?
Like in what scenario are you winning in Paris by 12 points without scoring 4 tries?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not going to happen.
Planning
that
an
way.
awful weird game.
Yeah, exactly.
Here,
like so realistically, Ireland will be going in with the knowledge that they need to win and score 4 tries in doing so. And in France
it's even worse. Like they have to score 4 tries and win this game by a truckload of points.
Yes.
It's a really interesting one. You know, they went and picked their full team last week against Wales, which was a complete dead rubber friendly game, and now they're going to focus. They've gone with their full team again this week against Ireland, and it's all with a mind that this Six Nations is super important and is the most important thing. And it was already over, you know, it was gone. And the second they lost to Scotland, they're going to have to win this game by more than England beat Italy. And if England are in a cruel mood, it's just going to be an unbelievable task in front of them. But I wonder, like, if they can come out with pomp and flair. French teams of old did pump Ireland, but they're going to have to get off to an absolute start.
Certainly in terms of, like, Ireland will likely be throwing the ball around a bit more than they usually have in terms of seeking that try-scoring element. And to be honest, you'd back this French side over that Irish side in a shootout game. And they certainly in the Wales game last week, Wales came throwing the ball around, scored a try very quickly. Are an exciting young PVAC coach team who like to think, and this France team at home did just best them in that shootout.
Listen, from a pure colour and neutral perspective, just the occasion of it, you can just soak it in for a moment. You go at this Saturday night primetime game, end of the Six Nations, when the first whistle blows. 3 teams could be crowned Six Nations champions at the end of it, and both teams are incentivized to go for it and score tries. You know, it has everything except fans, obviously, which is unfortunate, but it is just a quality occasion, great rugby occasion, and it's one of those real amphitheatres and stages and rugby as well. The Stade de France is a great.
I hope they let the band in.
Yeah, you get a socially distanced band to play some tunes in the background.
Like,
they should absolutely do that.
They should do that. But
I think France is back in lockdown, so you can forget about it.
They can lock them in. They can be locked down in the stadium while the match is going on.
They could be doing it remotely and having it pumped through the stadium sound.
No. But then, just in terms of, you're dead right in all of that. It is a massive occasion, and it is a shame that the fans won't be there for it.
But it's going to be great.
It is also going to be great, and we're going to be watching on Halloween night. And just the squads that were named, obviously France, you said, did go ahead with and name their best team.
A team that's been very settled, obviously, minus Teddy Thomas, who's injured. Yes. It's Cyril Bay, Julien Marchand, Mohamed Houas, Bernard Leroux, Paul Willemse, Francois Croix, Charles Olivon, Aldrit,
captain, I believe.
Yes, he is. Aldrit in at number 8, Antoine Dupont, Roman Entamac. In the centres, they've gone with Arthur Vincent and Vakatawa, which means that they moved Gaël Ficou to the wing with Rates on the other wing and Boutier.
Yes, big Boutier in a fullback.
Yeah, he's been a real find this year. And on the bench, they have Camille Shah, Gross, Demba Bamba, Taufi Fanua, Cretin, Baptiste Serran covering scrum half as he has been. Retier is in line to make his first cap. He's I think is he still in La Rochelle? I'm not sure, but he was Ratez's partner in La Rochelle back when Ratez was there.
Yeah.
And Thomas Ramos rounds out the bench for France.
Yeah, very, very good team. Very, very good team.
Yeah, nice balance
it's
to
definitely,
it. Yeah.
I'm loving this new look France. I've hated it, despite the fact that we've been the beneficiaries of it. Like Ireland have got one over on this French team and Toulouse even in the club level for the last few years. But this is by far the best France team we've seen in pretty much the last decade.
Yeah, they've
rugby needs France to be good, and I think the fact that the World Cup 2023 is in France has kind of focused their minds a little bit on the fact that they need to be good for rugby's sake and for their own sake. They can't be turning up and rocking up and in fourth year after year in the Six Nations.
In terms of the key difference, it's probably up front, as deadly as this backline is and has been. I mean, they have had deadly backlines in the past, although it is good to see that sort of Bastero team
all of that gone.
Done away with. I mean, how much better is Vakatawa in the 13 shirt than Bastero?
Yes.
Plenty better. But I think that the real difference maker this year has been the capacity of their pack. By and large, Scotland game excluded from this, but their ability of their pack to really take it to the big teams and
stand
beat them.
up and be counted for certainly at least 50 or 60 minutes of the game. They can be thereabouts, and they have good players throughout.
In years gone by, they've had good front rows and they've had good back rows, but what's really been missing is the second row, and I think the key thing this year has been the stepping up of Bernard Leroux and Paul Willemse, who was once in there as a second row, and you would have thought, like, what is this journeyman South African doing in a French team, dropping balls and playing lazy rugby, and like, he would have frustrated the hell out of you. And he's really come into his own this year. He looks brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an improvement compared to
and the like.
Yeah. Well, they do. Who do they have in last year? I can't remember his name.
Itoria,
former converted back row. Just softness throughout. Whereas it's a more hefty pack, and then certainly the decision to keep Shat on the bench, which is something they've done all year. Marchand is a quality hooker. Shat is probably their best hooker, but it just means that in the second half they have guaranteed impact off the 100%. Bench, which is great. It's a harsh on Shat because on form he deserves to be in there. But
it's one of those things, the Bismarck Duplessis thing that used to go on in South Africa as well. You've seen it done. You've seen class hookers deployed from the bench in many a team over the years. It's a pretty decent formula.
It is. It guarantees impact, because certainly in the second half they still find the fitness issue is a thing. They aren't quite as fit as the other teams in the comp a lot of the time.
And as good as the other pack options they have are Gross Bamba, Taufi Fanua and Cretan. Shat is probably the most dynamic of all of those guys, including Cretan, the back rower. Shat brings dynamism off the bench and a second wave to the impetus of their pack.
He's one of the best hookers in the world right now is Camille Shat. But then to pivot on to Ireland, who have named their team. First up, number 1, Cian Healy, your man, turning 100 today. On Saturday.
100 caps for Cian on Saturday. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of him. I think he's been a phenomenal loosehead over the years. I mean, he burst onto the scene as a skinny young quick lad in Leinster colours.
Developed into a great scrummaging
developed
machine.
Slowly and surely. Like he first cut his teeth as a scrummaging loosehead at the World Cup in 2011 when he demolished the Australian scrum when Ireland kind of pulled their trousers down in the group stage and got a win there. Thus cementing Australia's terrible record at Eden Park that they thought they were going to do away with. Which was funny, but Cian Healy owned that game. He owned the scrum in that game, and really from there he's had a lovely balance between being a very effective prop in the loose, good ball carrier. He's had some fantastic moments, perping Richie McCaw, and to becoming just a really, really great loose-headed scrummager. And certainly from 2015 right through to perhaps 2018, 2019, probably not, but 2015 through about 2018, and maybe even a couple of years before, he was one of the best scrummaging looseheads in the world, and possibly that the world has ever seen outside of South Africa.
He was taking names all through that year.
I remember doing Carl Heyman in a European semi-final. He's been one of my favourite players for a very long time, and while he has dipped a little bit in the last couple of years in terms of the elite standards that he had set for himself, he's still a very fine, brilliant test level prop, and certainly to get to century of Ireland caps is a super achievement and well deserved. He deserves a moment of attention.
He does, yes. No, we're huge Cian Healy fans here, so fair play to him. And then beyond that, we have much the same team as last week for the Italy game, with a few changes forced. We have one change forced. You have Herring, Porter, to complete the front row. Then Tadhg and Ryan renew their partnership in the second row. Doris Connors Standard is the back row. Interesting to see Connors get the nod there. Still incorrect to have Stander at 8 and Doris at 6. The jersey numbers should be switched, but 100%, whatever. Yeah. Murray Sexton retain their place as halfbacks. Then Aki Henshaw, Ringrose, obviously suffered a broken jaw in nasty one in charging down a kick. So in steps Henshaw to fill in his jersey. And then the back three remains Keenan, Conway, Stockdale. Again, should switch the jerseys. Keenan should be fullback, Stockdale should be 11.
Yeah, that one's arguably more impactful, although both have their impacts in terms of getting the debut guys into the right jerseys. Caelan Darris has played number 8 a bit now for Leinster, but has played number 6, I should say, a bit for Leinster. But he is a number 8. He came up as a number 8. He is a number 8. He's a very good number 8. He's got ball skills, which I know you like at number 8.
Oh, and
CJ Stander just couldn't be more of a number 6.
Yes.
If he tried. He's never been a number 8 at all.
He's been a number 6 playing at number 8. He's done that for Ireland for years. It's a constant gripe of mine. He's a very fine player. He leads a defensive line well. He's very physical. He just can't pass a ball properly. He's not a good passer of a football, which is what a number 8 needs to be. A number 8's not just exclusively a ball carrier. He's a playmaker. Look at Hoskins Tutu. Look at Kieran Reid.
It doesn't tell in too many areas because you can chuck the rolls about, but even at the base of a scrum, having a guy
he's terrible at that, actually. It's one thing we've missed since Jamie Heaslip has retired, is a guy who can control the ball at the base of the scrum. His footballing is not great. I would love to see Doris.
His heft is great.
His heft is great.
But his ball skills might let him down sometimes. They have on the bench gone for Heffernan, the Connacht lad, covering hooker, Ed Byrne covering loosehead, Finlay Beelum and covering tighthead, Delan covering lock, Peter O'Mahony covering the back row, Jameson Gibson Park, Ross Byrne and Chris Farrell in the backs.
Yes.
It's more or less the exact same team, obviously, with Farrell coming in on the bench. Interesting. There's a couple of interesting omissions in that one. Obviously we would know quite a bit about the general relative form of some of these Irish guys, and as good as Gibson Park is, and to see him coming in, and as good as Murray can and has been, Kieran Marmee in the form scrum in the country, not in there, and Josh van der Fleer, who's been an absolute stalwart in the 7 jersey and a brilliant defender, usurped seemingly by Will Connors, who's come straight into the team. And listen, he got man of the match last week. He played great, but it's interesting to see Josh out of the picture.
Yeah, that is very strange to me. Because he hasn't been in bad form actually either for Leinster or for Ireland. So
and what Leinster did, and what I kind of assumed Ireland would do, is they put Will Connors in, I think, for a semi-final game, and he got man of the match, and then they took him out and brought Josh in for the final of the Pro 14, and he got man of the match. I thought they might try that, but listen, I have no issues with Will Connors.
I think he's been brilliant. I think he's lit it up in a Dan Levy-ish fashion this year. He's kind of burst through and really taken the jersey with 2 hands. So fair play to him. But then we move on to just the outlook for either side in terms of what they're looking to do, and we'll start with the hosts, France. And what they need to do with the ball. When they have the ball, how do they attack this Irish team? Well, it starts with tempo, doesn't it? Like, Ireland are a slower team than France, typically. And
Ireland don't like it when the pace is at helter-skelter. In terms of when they're defending, I don't think anybody would like to be up against this French team when they're playing with tempo.
They're very tough to
They're
stop.
tough to cope with. They have great instincts. They really do run excellent support lines, and they focus on not leaving each other isolated, and they'll flood very narrow channels with very many players, and all of them will get a touch. Their offloading game is stellar.
On the wing again is one thing they've done before, where it just means they can flood those channels with centres, de facto centres, and try and link and create those overlaps. It's a good picture for them. And
then they always have Duponts and Olivons running tracking lines and support lines all day long. That's just drilled into their heads.
He's the most important player for them, I think, is Dupont.
In
terms of generating that tempo and control, he's stellar, and especially because Ntamak is a fine player, but he's actually like the tradition in France. It's the petit general. It's number 9 who does most of their playmaking. The 10 can sometimes be a bit of a passenger in those teams. He's certainly I've seen that for Toulouse and for France too.
Although last week Ntamak was stellar against the Welsh, and he really did have a lovely game. He was cutting lines. Wales were standing off him a bit, and he was able to make some things happen. I think they have to understand that up against Ireland, Ireland have picked Will Connors for a reason, and this is Will Connors, a guy who's just an out and out defender at 7, and he does fly up in the 10 channel and in that first receiver channel,
and
be it a forward or an out half. Yeah, get in your face and make good tackles that drive you back behind the gain line.
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying to bring. He's trying to bring that Underhill game. So I think France do need to make a couple of adjustments to that, understanding what Ireland have done. I think they need to probably sit a little deeper in their line, perhaps. And they're pretty good at doing that usually, just making a blitz a non-factor by standing off.
Yeah.
And then the other thing would be to perhaps get some of their big runners, some of the maybe the Olivons of the world, maybe the Aldrits of the world, or maybe even some of their hefty guys like Willemse, getting into Will Connors off first phase or second phase and sitting him down and making him tackle you, and then moving quick ball off that. I think that's a very effective strike runner if Ireland are thinking we're going to use this guy.
If you can occupy Will Connors in a tackle without forcing a breakdown, either you can get if you can get the ball free to DuPont wrapping around, and then suddenly Connors is out of the picture and you're a little wider. That's a tougher picture for Ireland to defend.
It is. If Ireland are thinking we're going to use this guy to slow up French ball and attack them at first receiver, and then France sit him down and move the ball instantly, then that defensive shape is falling away at the first hurdle, and all of a sudden they can use their instincts and attack the space, and Ireland will be a little disjointed. Yeah, that's definitely a winning picture for them.
It is. That's what they're going to try and create.
The other thing they have to consider is obviously that Ireland are going to have two defensive-minded centres, and Aki and Henshaw trying to shut them down.
Probably their most defensive-minded combination.
Well, I think
Henshaw Farrell.
Yeah, Henshaw Farrell would be the one. Aki has a bit of
flair.
He likes to play offensive rugby primarily, but he loves to put big hits in too. Yeah. Whereas Henshaw and Farrell off the bench, to be fair, are centres who think first and foremost about defending.
Yes.
And so that's definitely a challenge for them. With the power that Vakatawa has had, they're going to be flying out of the line trying to make killer reads, and it's up to Entomac and sort of the distributors in that midfield, with Vincent coming in as well, to try and make the most of that. To support each other, perhaps paint a little bit of a deceptive picture, to perhaps take some short carries on the inside first, check those defenders' runs, and then support each other. Like if Henshaw or if Aki are getting a hold of you, having a forward even or someone off the shoulder to take a pass and offload and keep going could be vital, because you can make mugs of centres for being too aggressive as well. From a defensive point of view.
And France have the kind of game plan and the kind of traditional running rugby that can create.
Well, it can go one of two ways. You can get smashed behind the gain line, or you can put a guy into a big hole.
Exactly. And they'll certainly be trying to do the latter for the most part. But it'll be a big job. Like obviously Vakatawa is danger city. They'll be trying to get him to sit down some of those defenders and get a bit wider. But it still will be a huge job for them in the tight, to be honest. That's where they've lost these games against Ireland before. So the likes of Captain Olivon, who's been brilliant this season,
Paul Willemse,
all of these guys need to make their make their carrying game count. And force Ireland back into contact.
And get some offloads going.
Ireland don't like the avoid speed. The rucks, try and keep phases going for multiple passes in a phase, move the Irish guys around, and create their picture. Good running rugby, and against a buckled Irish defence rather than a disciplined, focused one.
The other thing they should consider, if they aren't getting as much purchase with that speed game and things are slow, there is purchase to be had against the Irish defence with little chips, and it's not something like... France are almost a team quite in the mould of this Racing team that have done so well, except in the difference that Finn Russell brings so many attacking kicks.
Yes,
he brings such a variety of them, and it's such a weapon.
Well, we've seen Entomac do a little bit of it for Toulouse, a little bit of chips over the top, just not quite as often.
I haven't really seen him do it in blue, and I think you saw in the England game the blueprint to stop the Irish defence is there for everyone to see. I mean, you're going to have their back three. Stockdale is a virgin fullback in many respects at this level, and they have their 9, Conor Murray, in the defensive line, usually in the wide channels, part of a brick defensive line. Where's the space in behind? And certainly I would love to see, be it DuPont or be it Entomac, or even Boutier is more of a big bomb kicker, but somebody to put a little toe on the ball and to check that Irish defensive line and maybe even find some space, because England found tries all day.
Yes,
with those kicks and
chipping over the top. No, and to be fair, the All Blacks can do it as well. Like it's been a frailty in this Ireland defensive system, and then also in the backfield, as you say, Stockdale is a virgin fullback. It's a system that was kind of built when Rob Kearney was there, who was his kind of nous was kind of second to none in the international arena in terms of he could be alone in the backfield and cover all the space somehow. Whereas pretty much no other fullback in the world can.
He had a lovely read on opposition tens. You know, I remember I saw an interview with him recently where he was talking about that very thing. He's always got an eye on the 10's eyes and what he's going to be doing. And he's reading them before they make their decisions.
Exactly, and it's a good poker player's kind of thing to do. Whereas like with any other option Ireland have at fullback, including Stockdale, or even if it is the other back three members of the pendulum, their defensive line is very numbered up. The space is in behind them. They should try and isolate that, and especially if Connors is all flying out of line and the centres are bringing that line speed. That's where the little
kicks check those runs, absolutely. Exactly. A little aside just on that Rob Kearney interview, it's complete aside. I think it was an interview he did with Off the Ball, but he was saying from a fullback's reading point of view, he likes to read 10's eyes, and he says that every 10 in the game without fail takes a glance at where they're going to kick the ball before they kick it. Except for one, and who was that?
Finn.
No. In his career. I'll give you 2 seconds.
Oh, it's going to annoy me because I can't think of Farrell. No.
It was Dan Carter. Unsurprisingly, that's the 110. He said never even glanced. Would be completely bamboozled about where he's going to kick the ball or what he's going to do.
And
then all of a sudden the ball was there.
Some of Kearney's worst performances from fullback against the All Blacks. That mighty All Black team. That's not.
He said he never had a read on them. Never had a read on them. Anyway, that's just a complete aside.
It's an interesting
going
one
back to the game.
Because I reckon even if they are dropping kicks on the toe, yes, they are eyeballing the space where they are. So try and keep an eye on that. That's a good tidbit for Stockdale if he's watching. But in terms of France, then they just need to not panic as well when they have the ball, because that has been a symptom. Like when things like if Connors is succeeding in chopping them behind the gain line, or if the centres are shutting them down a little bit, what can't happen is the knee jerk kick away aimlessly, or just
force something, shoveling shite and doing sort of the Racing picture against Exeter where they compounded their offensive
turning
errors
one error into 5 or 6 in response to just a disciplined defence.
Especially understanding the context that they're chasing a score. There isn't room for impatience, because if they're just flinging shite ball away, that's potentially going to play the great defensive reading of Henshaw and Naki into the game.
And you might see intercept tries and stuff like that.
That's the catastrophic picture. So they have to be calm.
Be aware of that and try and have their
DuPont needs to be the guy who makes that happen.
Well, himself and Olivon and Leroux, these experienced guys. They have Marchand, who's captain for
DuPont runs the offense.
He does run the offense.
He's the guy who needs to just make everything calm down and not have people throw stupid passes and take a leadership role.
Well, the leaders need to take collective responsibility for that. It's on them that kind of hinges, or otherwise. We've seen in the past some lacking French teams allow those errors to kind of get on top of them, and then you've seen the leaders, you've seen captains giving out to debutants. I certainly remember a Pascal Pape moment from years gone by where he fired a ball into touch himself on the debutant winger, had no chance, and then turns around and screams at him, and it's like, that is meltdown mode from your leader to your debutant, chastising him over something he got wrong. And it's like, that's obviously horrendous. I do rate this French team much more highly than that French team,
100%.
and they need to be a bit more calm, be patient, even though they are chasing what will probably have to be a big score to try and win it. Can't afford to get reckless with that, because Ireland will pounce on those mistakes.
And then just end your chance. That's 100% a concern for France. They need to be calm and they need to be controlled. In terms of when they don't have the ball, how to tackle the what Ireland are trying to do with the ball. It's an interesting one for them. I mean, Ireland's new style and new shape is very much in its infancy. They have moved forward pods a little wider than they used to do. Even off 9, the forward pods are a little wider. They're still struggling to get 2 pass phases going, but they are at least using the whole width of the pitch from an Ireland point of view.
Yes, they're not turning back on themselves once they reach the 15-metre line, which they used to do.
And they do have forward pods in the wide channels, or at least one forward on most occasions in the wide channels, which is definitely a good thing, but whether they can get it to them or not is another thing. I mean, from France's point of view, they have defended pretty well so far.
Yeah.
They do have heft, they do back their tackling, they're not as soft in that area as they once were.
Yeah.
And I definitely would expect them to be up to the challenge, and they're going to have to be up to the challenge of meeting Irish ball carriers, of meeting James Ryans and Caelan Darris's and CJ Standers, and not taking a backward step.
Yeah, that's going to be pivotal in terms of how this game goes, because you know that Ireland probably will try and start off 9 and try. That's always the way it goes for Ireland. They'll try and build.
Yeah, they're moving it a little wider, but it's still off 9.
Yeah, exactly, and it still involves winning those collisions first and foremost before any of the other offense seems to work. Which is frustrating from an Irish point of view, but from a French point of view, it means you know what to expect and you know what to prep. It needs to be those tackles, even if meeting CJ Standers with 2 guys, one low, one high, smash them back. And as much as I don't think they have many expert poachers in this French team, in fact I know they don't. Camille Chat off the bench is one, but for the most part it's not going to be their game. But you can still target the ball, try and force turnovers by just dislodging the ball in that contact. If they can do that, like they are experts at transition, and Ireland will be tough to fold back into their shape if they can generate turnovers. But I think the way for them to do that is in the actual contact itself. A big swinging arm, stripping the ball, target it. Like you can force hold up turnovers,
punishing loose carries for sure. I mean, they don't want to see a repeat of that 40 phase situation where they just
couldn't get the ball back.
They couldn't get the ball back. They couldn't do it. Like, that was what happened 2 years ago. Ireland took it 40 phases and kicked a drop goal to win that game.
Yeah.
Right scrappy game, but with an epic finish.
And we've seen it twice since for Leinster v Toulouse, which was a similar picture as well, where Leinster just elected to hold the ball because they don't have many poachers, and it was tough
you
for
might
the French
see Ireland
team.
try something like that. Certainly, I think the new shape will be abandoned if it gets the minorest bit of resistance in terms of France start winning contacts and they can't get it out wide. I think it will tighten right up again, and they'll start. But they don't have the Tyke furlongs, that they had back then. They don't have Ian Henderson.
No, certainly Tyke Byrne in the locks is a little bit soft.
Yeah, so from France's point of view, I think that's a winning picture. If they can get Ireland folding into that sort of shape, that's obviously massive for them. I think the other thing that's massive as well is the backfield. I mean, if they get any sort of victory or purchase from a defensive point of view, Ireland are going to pivot to kicking it to them. Yeah. And they didn't box kick much last week, but they certainly wouldn't rule it out.
No, I expect to see a return of the box kick for the most part. Which is a shame.
But even like the kicks that they did do were de facto box kicks just from Sexton. They were big bombs. Some of them were going too deep to be contestables, but some of them were in the contestable range. And from France's point of view, playing Ireland into the game is not dealing with those.
Yeah.
Is ended up, dropping that ball or letting it bounce or all that kind of terrible stuff that you sometimes see from them. They have Gael Fickou and Rattez, which, Ficou's good in the air. Rattez is short.
Yeah, he's certainly vertically challenged in that regard.
And Boutier, obviously, at fullback,
Boutier
pretty
is
solid.
Yeah.
But that's a massive job for those guys. I expect, like, if anything, Ireland are probably going to try and target Rattez.
Yeah.
And who's his opposite number?
Is it?
Keenan, young man
Keenan.
Keenan. Keenan's a fullback. So that's a dodgy matchup for them. They might want to transfer Rattez out of that position and put Boutier in that position. I know they have to get the pendulum going.
You've got to get it going. I think Boutier is in charge of managing that pendulum anyway, so if he wants to...
Well, one of the things that can be of value for them is that if Ireland do anything, they tend to do it quite slowly and predictably, so you'll know where the kick is going long before it's in the air.
It's true. It's true. So, they just need to be savvy enough and mindful of that. But be physical without the ball and force Ireland into their narrow shape, force them to kick loosely back to them, and then pounce on turnover. That's going to be the French picture for them. 100%. Set piece then is quite an interesting battle. Obviously, as you said, there's no Tyke Furlong, but there is a Tyke Byrne because there's also no Baird, no
Ian
Henderson. So for Ireland, they're a little shorn of heft. They were a little vulnerable
they are a little vulnerable at scrum time, and it's the ugliest picture for me. I'm such a Cian Healy fan. I would hate to see his 100th cap spoiled by French scrum dominance, and yet I've never seen an Irish scrum more vulnerable to being dominated by the French. Not really since Cian Healy's come into the side.
Yes, yeah.
There is an opportunity here. France are heavier in the tight five. their forward scrummagers, Cyril Bay and Mohamed Hoas, as hot-headed as Hoas can be.
He is.
I think he has a very good scrummaging prowess, and I think they if they have their savvy about them, this would be a real area to dent Ireland's confidence and to really that would knock, because Ireland aren't really used to conceding scrum penalties at a high volume. Really, the last time you saw it happened. It was quite shocking to see it happen in the Heineken Cup quarter-final from a Leinster perspective.
Yes.
Being scrummed off the ball, Vincent Koch doing a job on Cian Healy. It's not a picture we're familiar with.
No.
But it's starting to creep in as Cian Healy gets on, and I think if France are wise, they'll target that scrum, because it can break the back of the team. It breaks your confidence.
Well, we've seen it with Dev Toner in there in years gone by, that it's weaker in the second row in terms of rarely dominated, but not dominant itself.
Yeah.
And Tyg Byrne is a similar issue there. He's kind of a back row come second row. He's a little softer. He's
also Andrew Porter is not. He's
not the scrummaging force. He's not the same force as Furlong. It's an area that France, I think, will be targeting. They do scrum for penalties, and they have the tools to do so. The line out then also very important. We've Herring's darts were good. And Marchand's also, they were both pretty accurate last week.
The line out takes on a serious significance, even more so than usual this week, because I certainly would expect Ireland, based on what I'm hearing from Johnny Sexton. Like I like Sexton's chat in terms of there's an understanding there that the 4 tries is what's needed. We're not about to be kicking threes. We're going to go to the corner and try and maximise our chances, because first of all we need 4 tries. So I think that Ireland are going to be kicking to the corners, and I think if France are wise, they'll be doing same as opposed to kicking threes. I just don't think that will be smart. In terms of racking up a score, it's just not going to do it in enough time. So I'd expect both sides to be chipping the ball in the corners, and then your 5 meter or 5 meter to 22 meter line out plays are going to be absolutely pivotal in terms of converting chances. So
maul offense and defense for either side, big jobs for the likes of Ryan. And actually Tyg Byrne is a decent spoiler at maul time. That's one thing I would say. His line out prowess is pretty good, and certainly from the French point of view, they'll need Leroux stepping up. They'll need Willemse. Willemse is a big hefty lock. He's not necessarily the most flawless line-out operator. I think some of their lighter back row guys. You wouldn't
throw him up there.
No.
Aldred's good line-out.
Aldred's a good line-out. But actually, their whole back row can receive in the line-out. So they need to mix it up and be deceptive with it. And then at maul time, I kind of expect Ireland to have a slight edge just in terms of the organisation of setting a maul.
Ireland's maul can be good. When Ireland are at their best, their maul is a nicely oiled machine where they take the line out and transitions perfect, and they pivot off the side, and very often they're hard to stop from 5. That's definitely a huge part of Ireland's picture. I think likewise what you call the third set piece, the restart, which is definitely fair comment. I mean, there's definitely scope for Ireland to get an edge here. You saw at the very start of the game France just being dialed out, and Aldred dropping a ball from the first kick ended in 7 points. That's definitely
you'd hope on Super Saturday Six Nations Day that people aren't going to be switched off at restart time. It's something that you tend to see more in friendlies. It does happen. I'm not disputing that, but it's criminal. It's the kind of one that the coach will be absolutely lambasting you. Not just the first kickoff of the game or of a half, but like when you've just scored, the onus is on you to exit your territory. That's got to be the dialed in focus of every single guy on the team that's just scored. So dropping a ball cold off the restart is just criminal. It is in that context. So hopefully we will see Ireland manage to put a little bit of pressure on them, maybe ask that question, but I'd expect both teams to be pretty switched on for the restarts, and for the most part
there are two sides that have struggled with them. Ireland have struggled with England's restarts. They tend to set up a very narrow scope for exiting, and they still haven't quite figured out, if they're bottled up inside their 22, how to get out of there. Chances are they're going to Murray box kick and not do it well and give France the in. And likewise France, they sometimes turf the ball, they sometimes get mixed up, they aren't too comfortable being deep in their 22. So I think either the scope is there for either side to really attack the restart. And I think you could see either one of them getting an edge.
Certainly, it's one thing selfishly from an Irish point of view is just our exit play. Mix it up, for God's sake. Like England did their homework on it in the World Cup year. They knew that Murray box kick is the way they exit. Murray's a right footer, so put him on the right hand side of the pitch, so it's an out to in kick. It's tougher. They just did that straight away, and we just box kicked it, played into their hands. Why do you not pass it to the other side? If you're going to box kick it anyway, pass to the other side so the right footer is curling into touch so you can get a bit more purchase. You just need to have a bit more confidence to move the ball. And hopefully Ireland will. They showed a little bit of that, but albeit against Italy last week, it would be nice to see us vary our exits. Like certainly if France are expecting the box kick,
one of the
deception
ugliest pictures in Ireland rugby in recent years has been Ireland setting up a box kick, and you can see the opposition centres through right wing. Like if they're on the right side of the field, you can see the defensive centres and outside backs all drift into the backfield behind the fullback, and you're like, hang on, open space, and they box kick it anyway.
Yeah,
and
heads up rugby, please. Yes, no, that's a selfish
Irish. Heads up rugby's
one.
been a talking point from the Ireland camp this week. They've been trying to hammer home heads up rugby.
Yeah, read the space, because France will leave you some ins. They tend to on defense. They can switch off at moments, and it's up to you. The onus is on you to recognise them. Otherwise, it's all for nothing. They can get away with switching off if you're not going to try and punish them. Yeah. But I think given the scenario, both teams will be dialed in to try and score points. Then with Ireland, when we have the ball, I guess when Ireland have the ball, the onus is on them to score tries. So we did see last week a kind of industrious new style of play, different pods, as you said, slitting slightly further off 9, little tip on passes. Certainly Peter O'Mahony's offload at the end of the game off the bench was
nice,
beautiful to see, and albeit against a fractured Italian line, but still great to see a diving offloading pass from them rather than just going through the ruck. It's been a bone to pick that I've had with Irish rugby in general, is just the perspective that a ruck or a breakdown is safer than a pass. It's just not. It's not true at all. But the notion that an offload is a risk and a ruck isn't is crazy.
Yeah, rucks are risky. Rucks are definitely risky, especially if you're isolated. That definitely needs to be dialed in.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw from Ireland like I say, we were talking about their pods mixed up across the wings. Forward spread out across the pitch. That's definitely they definitely have a decent shape to them. I like the spacing of the first forward pod of 3 at the moment. They tend to be quite wide apart. There's options for Murray to pick either one of the 3, and there's options usually for the middle guy to flick it out to the 10 from that forward pod. It's a pretty rudimentary shape, but I just like that they're doing it a little wider and it's less predictable in that way. The key really in offense for Ireland here is speed rather than slow, methodic 40 phase rugby, because I think France are going to be ready for that, and they're going to be determined to get it right this year. And I think in terms of the actual personnel in the Ireland team, they're less suited to that game. Daragh and Byrne being in there in particular, and even Connors, they're rangy, young, quick guys. Yeah. And they're better off being in a bit of space because they can all put a bit of footwork on, they can all link up and offload. Yeah. And so definitely they're better off operating with speed so that they can generate a bit of space, moving in wider channels, and then get a bit of purchase on the ball. So quick ruck ball would be massive from an Ireland point of view.
Which means Murray needs to get a fire under him and start passing crisply with speed, because he hasn't this season or the last 2 seasons.
And that's the other thing. I mean, if you look at Ireland, especially without ring rows, like they have pretty shapes in behind that first pot of forwards and Sexton, but it doesn't really get outside there, to be honest. Like the times that it does, it's a planned move where Robbie Henshaw moves into first distributor or Bundyaki moves into first distributor, but always the killer pass in any given move is going to be played by either Sexton or Murray at 9 or Gibson Park when he comes on at 9.
Sometimes. Actually, we did see one from Henshaw for Keenan's try last week, but
here's what I'll tell you, man. Like that try, this is the thing. Like I think that Ireland's passing game has been holding them back in a lot of ways, and that try is getting credit. If you rewatch that try, every single player who throws a pass, including Henshaw, catches it and throws it standing still. Yeah, like that try is never being scored at the top level. Yeah, but you got away with it against Italy. But you could literally catch, look up, and pass. Like obviously, you're more likely to get that right. Yes, but the skill levels that have let Ireland down is when they're trying to pass on the run. Well, when they try and get specifically one of the centres, Aki or Henshaw, to pass on the run, it tends to be not a great pass. And I still think when they try and get it wide, they'll just try and work Sexton wider and have him throw the pass. Yeah. And that's still a dynamic that's going on with Ireland. And Murray's in there as well, and Murray can definitely throw a killer pass in a playoff 9.
Yeah.
And I definitely would love to see more of that from Murray.
Yes.
Like a really biting, flat, quick
certainly
pass.
before, like in 2018, he had worked in that Aaron Smith kind of lovely, quick, crisp, wide passing off 9. So you can play off 9, but with variation.
Speed and width off 9, it can be good.
Yeah, exactly. And it moves the French around. It creates that deceptive picture. They've got to back themselves. Certainly, I think Ireland will be thinking that the last quarter should be theirs on a fitness level basis. They tend to think that about against the French. So like you want to try and test them and run them around, run them ragged first to have earned that right. Because you can see, like you only have that picture when you earn it. Like if you don't ask any questions for the first 60 minutes, then they'll still be there in the fourth quarter shutting you down. So you've got to be probing. You've got to be brave. Certainly, courage is needed to try and go wide, try and get the scores that they'll need to win the tournament. It's a great as you highlighted. It's a great test for this Ireland team. They have to go in. They have to go away from home against France and score 4 tries. They've got to win with a 4-try bonus point to secure.
I do like that there's guys having options to try things. I like that Peter O'Mahony was incentivised to throw that offload. I think Bundy Aki is in brilliant form and can flourish in that environment. Like we criticise some of their long passing on the run, but Bundy Aki in particular does bring a real threat.
Yeah, his running game is
Arthur
awesome.
Vincent coming into that French team. You know, if Bundy Aki can get off the shoulder of a forward or off the shoulder of Henshaw,
between Ntamack and Vincent, there could be some space.
Like they're not the best long pass forwards, but both of them can win a contact and throw an offload and pick a line off each other. Yeah. Like penetration through the middle, winning contacts, and then linking up. There is scope for that centre partnership to be a real handful for Vakatawa and Vincent, the sort of new disjointed pair to deal with. So I definitely think I would love to see Ireland try that. I would add the caveat though that at the end of the day, you know, I think this Ireland team are less likely than Ireland teams gone by to take it through 10 plus phases. I think if 5 or 6 phases go by and their probing moves haven't worked, more often than not they're going to try and set up some form of kicking play. And we were talking about it from a French point of view. I think they will try and target Rates in particular, but also, you know, Fiku as well, just putting good quality kicks in there. Like, I think from a tactical point of view, you know, as much as Ireland need 4 tries, I think in the back of their minds they'll be thinking it's not the situation where you need 4 tries against a team that can shut down and you have to create. It's when you need 4 tries against a team that also has to score big. And do we have a better chance, you know, focusing a lot on our defence and just putting France under pressure, putting them into difficult situations under pressure, and then allowing them to make mistakes that play you into the game? My suspicion is that they might be focused on doing a bit of that. Like they might be looking put high bombs up that put them under pressure, make their ruck ball messy and make them make mistakes.
Yes, because they are more mistake prone, certainly when they're in compromising positions. That's what Ireland will back themselves in terms of nous over this quite young French team.
And so in terms of try scoring, I think the line out drive is obviously massive.
Yeah, we've kind of seen it disappear a little from the Irish game for a lot of recent years. They haven't been quite as clinical off it. I would like to see a return to, certainly if you're going to be kicking penalties to the corner, which I'd imagine they will be, you need to be clinical off your line out drive. You need to execute from 5 metres out pretty flawlessly. So we'd like to see that transition done very well. And hopefully some herring tries.
Indeed, and pivoting on to sort of what Ireland we need to do without the ball, it sort of builds on that point I was just making about putting France under pressure. Because, you know, as dangerous as France are in the chaos, and this is something that constantly gets said, a French team that's forcing it, a French team that knows they need to win and is a little bit on the back foot.
Yeah, they're just as likely to concede a score as score one.
And that I think that's going to play into Ireland's plan a little bit. I think they're going to try and fly up a little bit. The 2 centres are going to go up and try and make things as awkward as possible for Ntamack, who is going to be feeding Vincent and Vakatawa. And I think if they get that a little wrong, you know, the likes of Aki and Henshaw are going to be dying to pounce on it. And I think Will Connors is going to be in Ntamack's face in particular all day long, causing him to have, you know, just none of the time that he had against Wales.
Well, that's got to be the picture. Pressure is a huge part of Ireland traditionally in terms of their game plan, and then more specifically if they need to create those scores. Well, like, yeah, as you say, what's statistically more likely? Are we going to get into a shootout, knife fight with France and go toe for toe? Like in Paris, you're going to lose that game.
Probably. But unless you can force them to try and create that shootout and take defensive tries. I mean, I think an intercept try is a big part of what Ireland are looking at.
Yeah,
if Ireland, you're planning for intercepts, but you're just planning to put them under pressure.
If your plan is working, a symptom of it is an intercept try. And Aki, Connors brings pressure, Entomac flips it on, Aki brings pressure, Vincent flicks it on, and before it gets to Vakatawa, Henshaw's in with an intercept. That kind of thing. It's a sign of good pressure. And
like, the French are almost allergic to catching a loose pass way behind the gain line and just conceding the play and take the sack, as it were, in NFL parlance. They'll always try something. Well, not always, but a lot of the time they'll try something. If they're on the back foot, they'll try and like a little chip or something mad, or they'll just kick it away. And that is where Ireland could get their purchase on. So I think it's very much a pressure-based defence.
Yes.
But that does start with winning that contact.
It does, and it also means like you can't, like Connors is obviously going to be flying up towards Entomac, and that's right and proper. The onus is on the pillars and the tight men to watch Dupont, because Dupont will be aware of that, will be looking for the space. You can't drift off, you can't like get too aggressive and be caught found wanting.
Somebody has to have eyes on that boy
all the time. Every single breakdown Dupont needs to be watched. It can't afford for a Kiwi kind of style where the scrum half's already over here looking here and then the scrum half straight through.
Like if if your setup is, you know, tired Cian Healy, if let's say for example you have player Will Connors, and your shape is, you know, Porter at pillar, Cian Healy looking tired in second receiver. Dupont's going to isolate that in a second, and what he's going to do is he's going to pick, run sideways and shape the pass, and then take the outside of Cian Healy, and he'll do that 100 times out of 100. You know, he's like, that is a really dangerous one for Ireland. So that's where France, if they can generate that tempo, I think where it starts with Ireland is not allowing them to generate that tempo. And that has to do with working the contact, you know, making sure that the ball doesn't come back quickly, affecting as best you can without giving away a penalty away the ball placement of France, just making everything awkward and winning those tight scraps. And that's where it's really on the likes of CJ Stander, who's a really good poach player himself. He is. To get on top of them. I mean, he really makes his name in defence. Well, they actually, as far as poaching is concerned, in terms of making the breakdown a scrap, Ireland between Porter, Tyg Byrne in the second row, Herring even, and CJ Stander and Connors then in the back row as well. Even Doris has picked off one or two, but it's not normally his main game. But they actually have poachers throughout the team, whereas France don't typically. They have more rangy runners. So they will be trying to upset the breakdown, generate turnovers, but first and foremost slow the ball, make it a mess for France, because France don't like playing slowly. If the tempo is going to be key in terms of how this game's going. If it's quick and helter-skelter, advantage France. If it's a bit more slow and methodical, you kind of think advantage Ireland. Although the other factor that can't be overstated is Boutier's boot. And that's something that big exit, useful exit plan. You saw his kick against England when they were out in Paris at the very first one in the season, where he kicked it from his own in-goal to the 5 metre line. He kicked it the length of the field. Phenomenal. And he's got a fantastic boot on him, and he does eye corners. Like I always want my kicking players to do. He eyes the corner, he eyes pinning it back. And with Stockdale, we were talking about as a virgin fullback, being aware of that and having to stand that little bit deeper to be mindful of Boutier, especially when they're on exit, is going to be very important. But it might open up the space for France to try the little dinky kicks. So Ireland are going to have to make some adjustment to be aware of that. Otherwise there could be pain. Well, for sure. Well, when both teams are going into it with an onus on them to score points or be like a score or die kind of scenario, defences are obviously under huge pressure from both perspectives. So then, with all that said, what do you think's going to happen? I don't know. Are you your green goggles on, or are you feeling a bit more melancholy about Ireland? Who knows? Is that the mindset? I don't know. I'm looking at the game. I see a very good French team that are very good at scoring tries, that I also see weakness in if you can put them under pressure, for sure. They're at home, despite the lack of fans. I don't know. What do you think? You're going to pass the buck on to me. But I normally vote with my heart, and that would just have Ireland comfortably win with a bonus point, no questions asked. It's grand, even if I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. I think that Ireland will play tighter enough and try and exploit the French mistakes. And then I think the outcome of the game is dependent on France's ability to execute under pressure.
Yeah.
And not make mistakes and punish Aki and Henshaw when they come out of line and find Vakatawa in space and link well with each other and exploit them when they get finished tries, when they get line breaks. And they're usually quite good at doing that this year. And yet, there is a part of me that thinks that Ireland could do them. Like, there's a part of me, like that Scotland game, that thinks, they can be got at, this French team. So I don't know. It's a
tough call. We're always tough to predict when it comes around to the Ireland fixture.
I just think this is actually a good matchup.
It's a great
in terms
game.
of two teams. It's just a good matchup. If they both have to be hunting scores, France, they lost to Scotland.
Is there a chance that Ireland score 4 tries and lose the game?
There is a chance of that. It's unlikely, but there's a chance, I guess. I don't know what to predict, man. I don't know what to predict. I suppose I should say something, but I'm not committing to anything.
Yeah, you're not. You're I'll say that Ireland win with 4 tries and take
win the Six Nations.
Take the Six Nations.
That'd be nice.
That would be lovely. Or they could do the Connacht style thing and score 3 tries in a losing performance and not get a point out of the game.
Maybe France will do them.
France definitely owe us some pain for the last few years.
They do. I wonder what kind of mindset they're going to show up in if
England have already
knocked them out, essentially. Like, they're going to be bigging themselves up all week, and then England are going to put 70 on Italy or something, and then they're going to know basically by kickoff that they can't win the Six Nations, when basically all they've been telling themselves is that we're going to go and win the Six Nations, and that they actually did screw it up against Scotland and Murrayfield, and then it's gone. Yeah, I'm leaning towards an Ireland win of the match, and then will they get a bonus point? I don't know. I'm leaning towards an Ireland win somehow, even though I know France are favourites. I just think they can be got at. That's my perspective on it. Well, so I think maybe an Ireland win, but a frustrating one where they don't quite do enough. Like, it's 3 tries or something irritating. I remember there was a few years ago when England had to beat France by a cricket score to stop Ireland from winning, and they nearly did, but didn't and won the game, and Ireland ended up winning the tournament. And I think we might get a reverse of that. I think Ireland might beat them maybe 20. I think it's going to be decent scoring, so I think maybe 27-20, something like that.
Something along those lines.
But that's 3 tries. They kicked 2 2-pointers. Would you believe 2 3-pointers? Would you believe that?
Crazy.
How sick would you be with that?
I'd be very, very disappointed if that's the case. No, Ireland with a bonus point going to win it. We are an Irish podcast. We're going to vote with our hearts and say that that's going to be. Maybe like law of attraction. If we keep saying it, it'll just happen. Ireland
Hopefully. In the World Cup semi-final. Ireland in the World Cup.
All right, with that, we'll move on.
Thank you for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and share with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of what we have to say, please be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when we upload our videos. And please join the comment section as well. We like to get a fun conversation going here.